No, we serve the people of this republic. Is this something you knew was happening before we left for Raxus?
Decided to interfere in a way that led to a senator's death.
How kind of you, Master Jedi.
The story of Count Dooku's disassociation from the Jedi Order is one of the most compelling tragedies in Star Wars lore. At first glance, Dooku's journey from a celebrated Jedi Master to a feared Sith Lord may seem like a simple tale of corruption. However, beneath the surface lies a web of political disillusionment, philosophical divergence, and deeply personal betrayals. Understanding Dooku's choice to abandon the Jedi requires us to look beyond the binary of light and dark, exploring the complexities of his character and the flaws within the Order itself. His transformation wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, but the culmination of years of growing resentment toward the institution he once served with pride. Dooku's dissatisfaction with the Jedi Order stemmed largely from its inability to adapt to the galaxy's ever-changing political and moral landscape. As a nobleman from the powerful House of Sereno, Dooku was intimately familiar with the machinations of power. He witnessed firsthand how the Republic's corruption eroded the principles of justice and equity the Jedi claimed to uphold. Time and time again, the Jedi aligned themselves with the interests of the Senate, even when those interests perpetuated inequality and suffering. For Dooku, this blind allegiance to an increasingly flawed system represented a fundamental betrayal of the Jedi's true purpose. Yet, Dooku's estrangement was not purely ideological. His departure also stemmed from the Jedi Order's rigid doctrines and emotional detachment. Despite its noble intentions, the Jedi Code often demanded sacrifices that alienated its members from their own humanity. For Dooku, the expectation to sever personal attachments and suppress emotions felt like a denial of his individuality. He struggled with the Order's insistence on suppressing ambition, as he saw potential in himself and others that was stifled by the institution's conservatism. Over time, these frustrations turned into a sense of alienation, fueling his doubts about the Jedi way. Adding to this growing chasm was Dooku's increasing awareness of the darker forces at play in the galaxy. His mentor, Master Yoda, had taught him the importance of vigilance against the dark side, but Dooku began to see the Jedi as willfully blind to its subtle influence within the Republic itself. The Sith's resurgence was not merely a distant threat, but a reflection of the very failings Dooku had come to despise in the Jedi Order. Dooku believed he was choosing a higher path, one unshackled by the limitations of Jedi dogma. Whether his decision was noble or misguided is a matter of perspective, but it undeniably reflects the moral ambiguities that define Star Wars as a narrative. In exploring Dooku's departure, we also uncover the deeper questions about the nature of power, loyalty, and the costs of ideological rigidity. One of the most pivotal reasons for Count Dooku's disassociation from the Jedi was his growing disillusionment with the Galactic Republic. As a Jedi, Dooku had taken an oath to serve the Republic and uphold its values. But over time, he became increasingly aware of the deep-seated corruption within the Senate. Lobbyists, corporations, and self-serving politicians manipulated the Republic's laws to benefit the few at the expense of the many. For Dooku, this wasn't just a flaw in governance, it was a betrayal of the very ideals the Jedi were meant to protect. The Jedi's unquestioning loyalty to the Republic became, in his eyes, complicity in its failures. Dooku's frustrations only deepened as he observed how this corruption disproportionately harmed the galaxy's outer systems. Planets like his own Sereno, once bastions of prosperity, were often overlooked by the Republic's centralized government. Resources were funneled toward core worlds like Coruscant, leaving many outer rim territories to fend for themselves. This inequity gnawed at Dooku's conscience, especially as he began to question why the Jedi, who were sworn to uphold justice, remained silent in the face of such widespread suffering. To him, the Order's neutrality was a form of cowardice, and their refusal to challenge the Senate was a moral failing. The final straw came when Dooku realized the extent to which the Republic's corruption endangered the galaxy itself. The Jedi, once champions of peace, had become little more than enforcers of Senate decrees, no matter how unjust those decrees might be. Missions that should have been about protecting the weak were instead used to maintain the status quo of the Republic's power structures. Dooku began to see his role as a Jedi, not as a guardian of justice, but as a pawn in a game of politics he could no longer condone. Dooku's frustrations with the Republic's corruption were magnified by the Jedi Council's unwillingness to act. The Council's insistence on maintaining political neutrality often led to paralysis in moments of moral crisis. Dooku, a man of action and conviction, could not abide this inaction. He felt the Council was betraying the Jedi's purpose, prioritizing diplomacy over doing what was right. This sense of betrayal was a crucial turning point for Dooku, as it convinced him that the Jedi Order, like the Republic it served, was irreparably broken. In abandoning the Jedi, Dooku sought to free himself from the shackles of a decaying system. He believed that by stepping outside the Order's constraints, he could pursue a more direct and effective path to justice. While his methods eventually became corrupted by the influence of the Sith, his initial motivations were rooted in a genuine desire to rectify the injustices he saw. This moment of disillusionment marks one of the key reasons for Dooku's fall, highlighting the complex interplay between idealism and pragmatism that defined his character. Qui-Gon's death during the events of The Phantom Menace represented more than just a personal loss for Dooku. He was one of the few individuals who shared Dooku's concerns about the Jedi's growing stagnation. It was a devastating confirmation of the Jedi Order's inability to adapt and protect its own. For Dooku, this loss was the emotional breaking point that turned his doubts into outright rejection of the Jedi way. Qui-Gon had always been a maverick among the Jedi, often challenging the Council's decisions and embracing a more nuanced understanding of the Force. In many ways, he was a reflection of the idealistic version of Dooku that still lingered beneath the surface. When Qui-Gon was killed by Darth Maul, Dooku not only lost a beloved student, but also a kindred spirit, who could have been a powerful ally in his quest for reform. This loss left Dooku feeling more isolated than ever, amplifying his disillusionment with the Jedi Order. The circumstances of Qui-Gon's death further fueled Dooku's resentment toward the Jedi, the Council's reluctance to act decisively against the Sith threat. Even after Qui-Gon's warnings demonstrated a dangerous complacency, Dooku believed the Council's inaction indirectly contributed to his former Padawan's demise. This conviction solidified his view that the Jedi were no longer capable of fulfilling their role as protectors of the galaxy. To him, Qui-Gon's death was proof of the Order's failure, a failure that he could no longer abide. In the aftermath of Qui-Gon's death, Dooku began to see the Jedi Code as an obstacle rather than a guide. The Order's insistence on detachment and emotional suppression only deepened his grief, as it left no room for him to process or honor his loss. This emotional suppression, combined with the Council's apathy, led Dooku to conclude that the Jedi were fundamentally broken. His anger and sorrow became the fuel for his eventual turn to the dark side, as he sought an alternative path to achieving the justice and balance that Qui-Gon had once envisioned. Qui-Gon's death was more than just a personal tragedy for Dooku. It was a symbolic moment that crystallized his doubts about the Jedi. It marked a point where his faith in the Order was irreparably shattered, setting him on a path of rebellion and ultimately betrayal. This moment underscores the deeply personal nature of Dooku's fall, reminding us that even the most calculated decisions are often rooted in profound emotional experiences. Dooku's story reveals the dangers of an organization failing to evolve with the times, and the personal toll such rigidity can take on its members. His departure highlights the Jedi Order's blind spots, including its reliance on an increasingly corrupt Republic and its insistence on suppressing individuality in favor of collective ideals. It was these cracks in the foundation of the Jedi Order that pushed one of its brightest minds to seek answers elsewhere, even if it meant treading a darker path. In many ways, Dooku's journey reflects the duality present in all individuals. His disillusionment stemmed from a genuine desire to rectify the injustices he saw, but his methods became tainted by the very corruption he sought to fight. His alliance with Darth Sidious, though initially born out of a shared vision for reform, ultimately led him down a path of manipulation and destruction. Yet, it would be a mistake to dismiss Dooku as merely a villain. His motivations, while flawed, were rooted in a deep sense of frustration with the galaxy's broken systems, a frustration many could empathize with. The tragedy of Dooku lies in the fact that he was both right and wrong. His critiques of the Jedi Order and the Republic were valid, and his desire for change was noble. However, his inability to resist the lure of power and his willingness to embrace Sith ideology overshadowed the purity of his intentions. In turning away from the Jedi, he lost himself, becoming a pawn in the very game he once sought to transcend. His story serves as a reminder that even the most well-intentioned individuals are susceptible to corruption if they stray too far from their principles. By examining Dooku's fall, we are also forced to confront the inherent flaws in the Jedi Order itself. The institution's inability to balance its ideals with the realities of the galaxy created an environment where dissenters like Dooku felt they had no choice but to leave. In a way, his departure was as much a failure of the Jedi as it was a personal one. Ultimately, Count Dooku's disassociation from the Jedi is not just a story about one man's fall from grace. It is a reflection of the complexities of morality and the choices that define us. Dooku's life serves as a poignant exploration of how ambition, disillusionment, and power can intersect to create both heroes and villains. In understanding his journey, we gain a deeper appreciation for the nuanced storytelling of Star Wars and the timeless themes it continues to explore.